So welcome everybody. Thank you for coming along to our Importance of Wellbeing webinar that we're hosting today with IVC Evidensia. It's really exciting to have Scott Stowell and Sarah Trowles here today. And Scott, he looks after people policy and colleague experience at IVC Evidensia. He's been in the business for over 2 years now and has experience in HR for over 12 years, having previously worked for a retail business, both in operations and in HR. And outside of work, Scott's life is currently taken over by renovating his house and looking after his beautiful pointer, Tilly. So he's probably got his hands full. And Sarah has also worked in HR for 20 plus years across charity, public and the private sectors. Sarah moved to veterinary 8 years ago and worked as an HR manager for a practice where she started to focus on wellbeing as part of her role. She then moved to work centrally for IVC 2 years ago and has since been involved in wellbeing, focusing development over this time and really enjoying being part of the transformation. Outside of work, she enjoys Pilates and gardening to relax. And as an old art college student, has started drawing again recently too. So family life also keeps her busy with 2 teenagers. So both very busy people, but very kindly have given up some time today to talk about wellbeing. We're going to be doing 3 little mini webinars focusing on wellbeing. The first one, the importance of wellbeing. The second one, looking at IVC's Wellbeing Champions Programme. And the third one, focusing on top tips for implementing a wellbeing programme in your practice. So let's get started with our first webinar on the importance of wellbeing. So welcome, Scott and Sarah. I'm just going to ask you both, first of all, to explain your role within IVC. So Scott, would you like to go first?
Yeah, of course. So I look after people policy. So, a lot of the kind of policies that you'd expect to have around things such as like absence, for example, but then also look after colleague experience. So got quite a vast role, I would say, but got a great team in place, which Sarah is one of my team. So I look after things such as well-being, but also then thinking about things such as diversity, and then also kind of a lot of it, the engagement of our colleagues as well. So quite a vast role, but really, really interesting and love it all the time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Scott. And Sarah, would you like to give us a brief intro to your role at IVC?
Yeah, sure. So as colleague experience specialist, I support Scott on all those policies and the wellbeing, ED&I, but definitely have a focus on the wellbeing side, looking at what we can do to make sure that the line manager support and colleague support's there, and looking at different resources and how we can kind of start to transform things and get that support in place more.
Brilliant. Thank you both very much. So starting with you then, Scott, what does wellbeing mean to you as an individual?
So for me, I think it's focusing it being not just on one thing. So quite often people think of it just being mental health or physical health as an example, but actually it kind of encompasses everything really. So you've got, mental health, financial health, physical health. There's a lot to actually, well-being in general. And, thinking about things such as like fitness, going for a walk, taking a break. For me, it's all sits under that that kind of banner, if you like, of well-being. And actually, it's more than just looking after, your physical health, as an example. It's thinking about, having great relationships, kind of nurturing relationships, and taking care of yourself in a way that allows you to be yourself and do what you want to do with your, especially with your life, ultimately. Sarah, what about you?
I think for me, it's that whole thing of feeling positive about what's happening to me, what I've got control of. So I'm making sure that I'm enjoying my work. I like to be creating something that I'm proud of, but also making sure that I'm looking after, like Scott said, that physical health as well. Even if it's a short walk at 10 minutes at lunchtime, just to get some fresh air and getting some movement in, I think helps for the afternoon. Knowing I've got that information and support around me. So if I'm not 100% one day, I know I've got a network of people around me to sort of support me and talk to me, but I'm also very much a bit of a make sure I've got a bit of me time to look after my own well-being as well as supporting others. It means that you can do that support for other people if you look after yourself as well.
Yeah, it's lovely for you to touch on the importance of community and support within your teams. And that brings us really nicely on to our next question of why wellbeing is so important for a thriving work environment. So Sarah, I wonder if you could pick up on that first, please.
Yeah, no problem. I think really I want to focus on the colleague point of view because that's obviously first and foremost what we're here to support. We want our colleagues to feel happy when they're coming into work and that they belong in their workplace as well. I think that feeling of belonging and having that support around you really means that you can focus on the role that you're doing and enjoy it more. So if they're supported and motivated, then everybody's able to contribute to the best of their ability, get the most out of their job, and it ultimately helps us to ensure that we're giving the best care to patients as well to make sure that they've got the best outcomes. So it all kind of links to that client journey as well. But really, it's a better work-life balance. We want colleagues to be able to focus on each area of their lives. So when they're at work, they can focus on work, but know that they've got that time away to be able to look after themselves and their families as well, which is why we know wellbeing information and support available to them whenever they need it creates that caring workspace that people can feel safe and secure in. That's definitely what I think an environment needs to be. Scott, what about you?
Yeah, so from my, I suppose we'll speak more about kind of from a business perspective and thinking about having a thriving workplace. So, from a workplace perspective, it's really important to have a motivated team. If you've got a team that are more motivated and more engaged, actually in turn, that ultimately creates that kind of successful environment. But also from a business perspective, it means that you've got things such as like reduced absence, because actually if you're supporting your colleagues' well-being and people feel well in themselves, then they're less likely to be off from work. It reduces things like burnout as well, and we know that that's often a factor within veterinary. But also it helps with that kind of getting the right culture, having better kind of retention of your colleagues as well, so that you keep the right team, and ultimately it creates that more kind of inclusive workplace that ultimately is then going to be more successful.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's there's many factors to consider when thinking about well-being, isn't it? But it's nice to bring in that business element and think about why it's so important for business development and for everybody to feel part of the community within a business itself, so that they can all thrive and they can all be motivated. So what do you think are the main well-being challenges that we're facing within the veterinary profession at the moment? And Scott, I'll come to you first on that one.
So for me, I think we'll probably all be quite aware of this one, in that vet teams need to take care of their mental health. We've talked about mental health for a number of years, coming out of the COVID pandemic, etc. Every day, colleagues are faced with challenges and unexpected situations, which can ultimately take their toll. And that's one of kind of the main challenges that we see. And for us, we offer kind of lots of levels of support for that, such as things like our employee assistance program. We've got lots of guides, we've got resources that are internally, and we'll talk a little bit more in the next session around kind of some of those tools that we've got. But we've also got kind of other avenues to support as well, in terms of things like mental health first aiders. And again, we're going to talk about wellbeing champions that we've got in the next session. But definitely, I think for me, it's that kind of mental health and really the challenges that people get faced with in terms of their everyday role that they do within veterinary.
Yeah, I
Sarah,
think if I sort of follow on from a point there, Scott, those people that work in our profession, they always want the best for the patients, and they'll work long hours, they'll put in whatever they can to do that. And it's obviously creates a challenging environment sometimes for them as well. So we want to encourage them to find a balance and that work-life balance. So we've done a lot of work to encourage people to look at flexible working hours so that they can have that time away where they don't feel that they've got to put all hours in. As well, it is important for them to get rest days and to make sure they're taking time to look after themselves, just to reduce that chance of burnout. And there's a lot of emotional fatigue goes into it as well. If an outcome is not exactly what somebody's worked towards, that can be difficult as well. So having that space and time away from work is really important. So that's something we've done in the last couple of years, is a lot of work on sort of flexible working and looking at what we can do to give people time away, as well as that importance of progressing their career while they're at work.
Yeah, thank you. So you highlighted a lot of really important challenges there. And can I just ask, as a big corporation like IVC, when did it sort of become obvious to you that you needed to focus into well-being in the way that you have? Because you're obviously taking great strides in, as Scott says, we'll come on to talking about the wellbeing champions in the next session. You're taking great strides to really think about well-being, but how did that sort of come about as a big corporation of something that you wanted to invest resources into?
So I think it all started, especially kind of heightened, I suppose, in COVID. I think there was that real recognition at that point that actually, we need to support our colleagues in different ways. Actually, one size doesn't fit all. And actually, as a business, we've heavily invested in teams such as my team. This team didn't exist previously. And actually, we've invested that time to make sure that we can give sort of those resources and that support because actually, we look at you can look at kind of lots of stuff that's out there for everybody in the general population, but actually we want to make it right for those in the profession, and actually making sure that it's reflective of that so that people understand actually what can they use, what support can they get. So I think it's definitely been heightened since COVID, and then we've heavily invested then from that point of view of going, actually let's put a team in place that can put that support in place ultimately for colleagues.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Scott. Sarah, is there anything you've got to add there, or is that?
I think it's probably the same sort of thing because I was working at the practice through COVID and coming out of that. So you saw the impact that had on people, some of them that worked through, some that didn't, were furloughed. And so there was a lot of sort of different things to deal with coming out of COVID and going through there. So I think as I transitioned over to working centrally with the team, I'd seen a lot of things and thought, this is what I want to get involved in. We'd done it in little bits out in practice, but it's good now to be able to do that, roll it out, across the UK and across all our sites. So yeah, I think it's something that we've got lots more to do. We're keeping going, but yeah, you can see the difference it's making already, which is great.
A really nice positive thing to have come out of the COVID pandemic there, actually,
Yeah.
the kind of recognition of the importance
Yeah.
of wellbeing. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Okay, that's great. So thank you very much for that. This is our first of three little short webinars that we're going to do around wellbeing with the IVC team. So our next webinar is going to be around the IVC Wellbeing Champions Programme, delving into that a little bit more. And then we have a third webinar coming out on top tips for implementing a wellbeing programme in your practice. So please do come back for those. Thank you both, Scott and Sarah, for joining us for this session today. It's been great.
Thank you.